I fully expected there to be way more technical issues.
Is this what the future of convention going looks like?
FanDome far exceeded all of my expectations.
And ask yourselves if a year out you want to sit in a hall with 6,500 people.
Hey everyone, I'm senior video producer Jeff McCobb, and we are back with another CinemaBlend roundtable debate because this last weekend we just covered DC FanDome, which so far in my experience is definitely the biggest virtual convention that we've covered thus far during this pandemic. And I just wanted to get some thoughts. These guys, Gabe, Sean, and Eric, have all covered their fair share of events. So I'm left wondering about the success of this thing and what it says for the future of convention going. Eric Eisenberg, our events guy, he's our events editor. He has covered, Eric, how many Comic-Cons have you covered in a row?
I covered 10 in a row up until, I guess this virtual one counts, so 11, yeah. And that doesn't even include like WonderCons and CinemaCons and every other stupid con that this world has thrown at me in the last 10 years.
In your experience, considering how long you've been doing this and how many you've been to, I want to feel out what you think the level of success was with FanDome. Did it run smoother than you thought it would? What was that like from your perspective?
FanDome far exceeded all of my expectations. I admittedly, having covered the virtual Comic-Con, as mentioned earlier this summer, my expectations were a bit more tepid, and honestly, it was a virtual event that even when I had the opportunity to step away, when I wasn't covering for CinemaBlend the stuff that everything that was coming out, I was still watching. I was still there. I was still excited. I was still engaged. And frankly, having covered a decade's worth of Comic-Con, that's not always the easiest thing to do with me, because usually by the time I'm done with 6 hours of writing, I'm saying okay, time to step away. I think they did a fantastic job just structuring the whole thing. There were zero technical glitches that I personally experienced. Just the lineup, there was truly, they revealed way more than I ever expected them to. I expected conversations, but the literal amount of content that we got out of it just absolutely blew my mind.
Gabe, I have worked countless conventions with you, Slap Happy, Delirium, up all night, editing till 3 a.m. So I know that you have experience with this kind of thing. Did it run smoother than you had assumed it would? What are your takeaways?
Well, there was no delirium or slap happiness this time, so I guess, I wasn't as stressed in general. But from a content perspective, as Eric was pointing out, I thought it was great. If you want to talk about sitting down all day and watching it, it had its lulls, and I think rightfully so, and maybe it's just the fact that, they're recording things separately and kind of the way we're recording this. It was a little cringy and a little kind of it just kind of stayed around too long here and there. But as far as the reveals that we got, the content that they actually showed us, it was great. And I think that's anything that you would expect to see in a Hall H sitting for hours or days at a time. And we got to do that, in our bedrooms, which is awesome. So as far as the success of it in general, I think it was great. I think it went smoothly. I didn't have any issues as far as technical issues with the stream or anything like that, and that's always a huge plus. So for me, it's all positive.
Yeah, to echo what Gabe said, a lot of fans are saying the same thing, that it felt really scripted, which obviously that's going to be a major factor that takes away from the authenticity of an in-person
and it was
interview
edited.
Convention.
It wasn't actually live. There was no actual live content, and you could see the edits. You could see certain instances where they jumped into a quote from an actor talking about something, and But that does kind of take away the naturalness of it. But at the same time, they maximize content in the amount of time they had.
Yeah. Which is honestly the edited approach I think is best, because the James Gunn panel for the Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
Well, it was edited, but there were so many people there that it very much was just they had to just let people talk, and it got that awkward Zoom meeting sort of cadence to it.
Are you excited to be a part of DC FanDome?
Yeah.
Yes! Win! I'm gonna win! We're excited. This is gonna be great.
It was fun. It was cool. There was a lot of famous people on a screen at once, and that was exciting.
Telling jokes and whatever.
Yeah, but I think the edited approach was a smart one anyway.
Sean O'Connell, this guy's been covering these kinds of events for over 2 decades. So in your experience, this is probably your second virtual convention. Are we getting the hang of this thing?
Yeah, and I'll echo everything that the guys said in terms of it being completely well organized, and I fully expected there to be way more technical issues. But what I found really fascinating, and if they have more time to plan for this in, say, next year, if they do another one, I would guess that they put these panels together relatively quickly at almost the last minute. And if you gave the producers behind these projects more time to come up with something more elaborate, I think that they could really impress. Now, of course, we're still stuck in a time of COVID, but I loved the Wonder Woman 1984 panel as an example of to have the main people up there. They did manage to do some of the things that you get from these conventions, which is a surprise for fans. It's fun for them to play like, oh, Linda Carter's here. Like, of course you knew she was going to be there, or they knew she was going to be there at the very least. But one aspect that I really like that they rolled in as well too, and I'm trying to think of some other examples that did it. I know the Wonder Woman panel did, but fan interaction. That's what's really important at some of these conventions. Fans will camp out and wait for the opportunity to get to ask someone who they adore a question. And I think those panels could have had a little bit more of that while still keeping this is clearly a pre-recorded bit that we're controlling. But the pre-recorded bit allowed them to keep to that schedule, which was, from the standpoint of people who needed to cover it, so valuable. You know, like it was down to the fact that like something was starting at like 2:54, and I was like, that's such a weird time. But it's because the regimented schedule just kept it flowing, and it flowed from start to finish. I was blown away by how well it worked.
Is this what the future of convention going looks like for the foreseeable future? We don't know when we'll be able to pack back into Hall H. I mean, it's almost scary now that we're getting the hang of it. Like, is this it now?
I think it's a yes and a no kind of thing, which is annoying answer, I know. But it's the sort of thing where I think what we'll see is these studios or these brands are more likely, I think, now to branch off from a Comic-Con and do their own thing, to really control their own narrative, control their own audience, control what they're putting out in a big way. I think that's very likely. But I do think that having been at Comic-Con a handful of times, and seeing, and I'm mainly on like the show floor and stuff when I do that. I don't do a lot of panels, so that's mainly my experience. But seeing the way these fans interact with each other, interact with the show that's going on, all the physical things that are happening, I think that there's still going to be a place for that. I mean, these people are fans in general are just incredibly passionate about what they do. Cosplayers, all of that, I think needs some sort of physical environment. And so does this mean the death of conventions? No, I don't think so. I think maybe that'll get downsized. Maybe we'll just see more conventions, some of them physical, some of them both physical and digital. I think it definitely paves the way for conventions to change, but maybe not as drastically as some people might think.
Well, selfishly, I think what it does is it changes the way media could cover these panels. We argue this about Comic-Con, San Diego Comic-Con specifically, all the time. If they created a component that allowed the media to watch it from a distance and freed up more space in these convention halls for fans to get in and us not taking their seats, listen, I wouldn't complain.
Hey, I'm a fan too. Come on, you and I are fans too. That's not entirely fair.
No. Yeah. You're 100% correct. And there are and for every one or two panels that we are thrilled we were part of, Eric, a Marvel panel or a DC panel of some sort, there's 9 panels that we had to gruelingly get ourselves through. It's a grind covering a convention like this. But one aspect that I think is going to stop this from becoming truly the norm for right now is piracy was an issue. The 2 major trailers that were supposed to be, huge moments during the convention got out hours before they were supposed to be shown. And one is the Snyder Cut and one is Matt Reeves' Batman.
How am I part of this?
There were people who were posting stuff on social media hours before those panels happened. And I'll give San Diego Comic-Con a ton of credit. They're not able to squash it 100%, but they do a lot to crack down on people filming stuff. And even if you do get a camera, it's a terrible, terrible bootleg. It's something at an angle and it's bad. So
Inevitable.
Honestly, the thing that this whole event has highlighted for me, and especially looking at it in contrast to Comic-Con at home, is kind of what I was stressing earlier, which is just the specialness of the content, which is just, it's honestly everything. Because when I think about the 2 experiences of Comic-Con at home and DC FanDome, the panels that they had at Comic-Con at home were exactly the same panels that like Josh Gad was organizing online to keep people entertained during quarantine. Right. They weren't special. They weren't really doing anything that we hadn't already been experiencing. However, DC FanDome, every single major panel that we saw brought at least one thing to the table, and that includes like Black Adam and Flash, which have not stepped anywhere near the production stage, but still brought concept art and still brought announcements and still brought all these pieces of news. And that, I think, is the key. That is what is going to define any attempt at virtual cons from this point forward. The problem, though, is that not everyone is DC. Most franchises just don't have that. Like, you can't do that for Mission Impossible because, yes, they have... they've been in production, but like it's one movie, or I guess two movies because they're doing back to back. So you're basically limiting it to Marvel and Star Wars and maybe Sony's Spider-Man. But yeah, I think that like as successful as DC FanDome was, that window is tiny.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
So would you say, kind of ironically, the studios or the brands that are more likely to leave a Comic-Con and do their own thing are the comic book properties? Paramount might show up with this, that, or the other. You know, you might get a Terminator reveal at Comic-Con now, which they've expanded to, and they do.
I'll be back.
There's sort of an irony
the
there.
One thing I'll
the
throw
big
in that
comic
direction.
Book...
I mean, I'll say like CinemaCon is probably the other answer to that, which is you could do studio film slates. But the thing is like most people. I mean, the four of us know about what's on a studio's film slate. We know that when Universal comes up, we know they have like Fast and Furious 9 and they have Jurassic World Dominion. But like, I don't know how you can sell everyone else about everything, like saying like, oh, you should definitely check this out, especially because DC is also just multiple mediums. Like you're talking about comics, you're talking about TV, you're talking about video games, and true. That's not a reach that every studio has.
And so, I certainly don't want to speak out against San Diego Comic-Con because I know that they are really struggling to put together a really great slate because they've seen studios and television networks branch out and just start to do their own thing. But I was talking about a couple of years ago, 20th Century Fox, when it was still just 20th Century Fox, doing 3 specific marketing events where they just did short presentations for their big movies that were coming out. And one year they did Logan and the Dane DeHaan movie that he did with Gore Verbinski, whose name I can't remember right now. And
was that a Cure for Wellness?
Yeah, Cure for Wellness and Alien Covenant. And they just did like one big press day for their big slate. And it was extremely effective. It was like having a convention panel, but just for that studio. Right. And then Eric, in one of the events, it's got to be one of the greatest events you've ever attended. I know I'm super jealous. Is Feige's thing that he did at El Capitan, where he
October
unveiled
2014. Yep.
What was that? The Phase 3 slate, the entire Phase 3.
The entire Phase 3 slate. Yeah.
So these studios that do have the franchises, that do have the properties that Eric's referring to. They have the ability to just branch out and do one of these whenever they want to. There's nothing special about August 22nd. Just DC decided we're going to do FanDome on that day. And they dominated the conversation. Technology allows them to do this, and nothing's stopping all of these major studios. Paramount doesn't have a huge slate, but if they put together something that was Mission Impossible footage, Top Gun footage, something from Snake Eyes, they'd commandeer a day. Yeah, exactly. They could do it. There's nothing stopping them from doing it, and then we would all pony up and cover it.
Help me help you.
How does the success of this dictate what the future looks like? Sean earlier mentioned that we could be looking at like a hybrid of these things. You know, we see more remote press. You know, I mean, here's the
thing. I don't think we know for sure if it's the future, but I would guarantee that every other studio is having a conversation right now, saying, look how well this went, and can we replicate it? Because this is an industry that people steal and copy off of each other all the time. And really, they'd be kind of foolish to not look at DC FanDome and think, hey, how can we make that model work for us now?
But it's also an industry of false lessons where they completely take the wrong answer away from any popular trend.
Go way too far in that direction.
I think the biggest point that Sean kind of made there was the ability to kind of dominate the news cycle and for the longest amount of time. Like at a Comic-Con, you hit your panel and you're like the talk of the town for an hour, and then the next thing gets announced, or 25 minutes because this other thing happened and there's this huge thing. It's very quick, and there's so much going on that you can kind of get lost in that. Pretty big stuff can get lost in that. So I see these studios seeing that, as Sean was saying, as a great opportunity to say, well, instead of every time we do this, this random weekend in July, we'll pick a month the way that we pick a movie release date away from everybody else, and we'll let everything out then. And we'll, whether it's a produced thing or they just release everything at once, however they would do that, I think that's a lesson that they would probably learn from this. And take that moving forward.
I want to throw back to Eric because like his background right now looks like he's sitting at a booth at Comic-Con. You know what I mean? Like as
I just rated one. It's fine.
Yeah, he's hawking his wares.
As he said himself, he's also a fan. So I mean, how is this gonna affect the fans moving forward? And do you see them watching something like FanDome and feeling any sense of that community that they feel showing up to these conventions?
Definitely not on the community front. It's definitely, I'm just there watching something on my computer. It's not a community thing. That's definitely not going to be replaced by this format. I mean, like, the closest thing they had to that was just the Twitter stream on the side of the screen, but that was nothing, and it was honestly going so fast that it was just impossible to engage with anyway. You are also talking about a common interest. You're talking about, like, they were, I mean, it was called a 24-hour event. I think they went, like, it was a grand total of like 8 original content hours that then got looped a couple of times. Any DC fan is like me is going to stick through the entire show, and they're gonna like stay hooked and watch all of this content. However, when you go to a studio, when you go to like the studio format, and you threw out Paramount as an example, you know, people may be really excited for Mission Impossible, but you know, maybe they don't care about Top Gun, so maybe they just click out, and once you click out, then you don't come back. That is, again, like the Hall H experience, which is the idea of like you have all of this A+ content that you just want to sit in your chair and just watch it play out on stage. But again, there is not even close to like a ton of brands that have that power. Right now.
And I sure don't want to doom and gloom this conversation. I really don't. But the minute one Comic-Con ends, you start to plan for the next one. So you assume that like they're thinking a year out. And ask yourselves if a year out you want to sit in a hall with 6,500 people. You know, we're not there yet from a social standpoint. And so I don't think anything's going to be normal for at least the next year. Like, we're not having conversations with, is it okay to be in a movie theater with 10 other people? We're going to be a long way off before we get to convention sizes. And I think that's going to drastically affect how conventions are run for the short term, at the very least, until we get to a point where we're comfortable being back in. I mean, CinemaCon is held in Vegas, and Vegas is jam-packed with people. Downtown San Diego during Comic-Con, it's the most amount of people I've ever seen in one place in my life. You literally feel like you're in a stew of people, which is good and bad. But when you think about what we're going through now as a globe, that's terrifying. And I would keep that in the back of my mind.
We're in the end game now.
Gabe, do you think this is something that can work past big cinematic franchises like Marvel and DC, or is it kind of specific to those niche communities and audiences?
I think it's more specific to those audiences and those communities specifically, just because they are so big and expansive. And Disney is weird because it is so massive and they have so much going on, including Marvel, and Star Wars and all these things. So they're a bit of an outlier of outliers, really. But I do think it's going to be those more cohesive brands that have multifaceted sort of outlets going on. Like DC had video games and movies there and TV in a big way. And, you know, Mission Impossible doesn't have that. For now, at least.
I guess we also haven't thrown Star Wars Celebration into this conversation.
But Celebration is a perfect example of a convention that some years feels thin. You know, like they might have a big standout panel, and then some years they choose not to share anything.
I mean, right now Star Wars is scheduled going ahead. They have Mandalorian season 2, but movies wise, they have nothing until a couple of years from now.
That we know of,
what would they tease if they were to do a big Star Wars day? I mean, it's.
You underestimate my power.
I think moving forward, I think what they need to figure out, the fan interaction that happens at conventions and the participation that happens at conventions is so passionate and so incredible. And I don't think that can be understated. I'm someone who watched conventions from afar for a long time and then was able to work here and go and cover them. And it's a pretty incredible experience. You know, I'm not a cosplayer, but I worked really closely with cosplayers, and that energy is infectious. And it's everyone there is super positive and is there for the same thing. And there's something about that is really awesome. And maybe I'm just missing it, but it's really awesome. And I think that because these big, especially these big comic book studios, big comic book brands, are so focused on servicing their fans and interacting with their community and building things up with their community, I think that we may see them branch off and do this sort of news cycle, content-driven focused thing on their own. But I think it's going to be very important that they come back to these conventions in some way and give these fans something to do there, something to interact with. Whether it's more exclusive stuff, maybe it's that, or maybe it's just something with the cast. Maybe it's this, that, and the other. I don't know what that is. But I think that there are so many passionate fans that want to go there and they want to spend time together and they want to spend time with these franchises. And it's a big part of their life that I think it would be a really missed opportunity to kind of like throw that to the side just because it's easier to just post a YouTube video and live stream it, you know? So I think it's going to be a balance. I think there will be change, but it's too great of an experience, I think, for fans to completely abolish.
I want to get some closing thoughts. So Eric, do you think that FanDome and its success is about to become a huge example for the way that we're covering conventions moving forward?
I think it is. I think there are, again, people are going to take really good lessons from what it was able to pull off. People are going to take some really bad lessons from what they pulled off. But I think that any successful thing in Hollywood is always going to be replicated. That's just how this industry works.
Sean, are we still looking at you think we're looking at a hybrid moving forward? They're going to feel it out and... fine.
Yes, for the short term, yes, because I think that's what they're going to have to do. But I also agree with the statement that was brought up earlier, and I think it was by Gabe, that the passion that's shared at these events is hard to replicate, and there are going to be filmmakers that want to do something unique and extraordinary, and it's once you've been in a room like Hall H when something incredible has happened, you do sort of chase that high. And so I think studios are going to go back to leaning into that sort of, I mean, it's show business, you know, there's an element of show business to it. And I think once it's safe, we will start to, as an industry, gravitate back towards having big fan celebrations because it's truly remarkable when it comes together.
Gabe, any closing thoughts? What the hell is up with our career path?
I think DC in particular is feeling the success of this right now. You know, I agree with Sean that in the short term, I think everyone's trying to figure out a way to duplicate that, especially because there's so much uncertainty moving forward. I do think we're gonna get back to a Comic-Con with those conventions, those bigger, wider, broader conventions at some point. But you know, for now, I think this is a great way to do things, and I'm happy to tag along. So.
Well, what do you guys think? Let us know in the comments below. Did you enjoy FanDome? Did you think it ran smoothly? And most importantly, is this the way of convention going moving forward for the foreseeable future? Let us know. Let us know your thoughts while you're down there. Hit subscribe, turn on your notifications. Gabe, Sean, Eric, thanks for being here, guys.